we're good. Okay, so with the navigation North Star designs, they've come through most of the final stages of UXR. We think that we have the winner essentially from that, which was this one design that was the super sidebar. As a team, the next step is to get this into MVCs. So last week, Nick and I were going through this one, just dropping some comments in design management, and came up with, it looks like 5 potential MVCs that are fairly simple that we think we could do. But we need to talk through all of those with engineering this week. On Thursday, we're going to have a kickoff for the North Star navigation. And so we'll talk through some of these ideas. But the really cool thing is today, Nick went through and took these, and he actually mocked them up so we could see them a bit better. So I'm going to stop sharing on my side and have Nick just kind of go through and talk through some of his ideas of how we could take that full design and like break it down into the smallest things.
Yep. So I essentially created a file that starts here at our current state and then essentially shows like a path that we could take to get to our more finalized North Star design. So I'll have a little bit disclaimer here that although I have these set up in somewhat like out of a linear path of getting to that North Star, one, this is kind of like a first pass. That's a way we could get there. So a lot of this ordering could be, adjusted based off of what we see as priority, as well as, maybe development effort has a lot of impact on that as well. And also, like a lot of these steps, I do think can be done probably in tandem, meaning that we don't have to say like complete this first step in some instances before we do like a different step. So those are a couple of things I just want to point out, and I'll just go ahead and start going through this. So the first step that I have in here is ensuring that we have a persistent sidebar, because the main concept of that super sidebar concept was that we had everything consolidated into a left sidebar. And so really, in order to get us to that point, we have to make sure that we do have a consistent sidebar across our product. Otherwise, you just won't be able to navigate. You'll get stuck in certain areas. So that's kind of like a prerequisite to be able to even have this like sidebar proposal. So this includes things like, our projects page today, our home dashboard, which is oftentimes just a projects list, things like your merge requests and issues pages. These all don't have a sidebar today. And so this is where we would need to look into adding a sidebar to those pages. And when we tested this super sidebar concept, we essentially created a separate section called, in that instance, we called it home. Here I've labeled it as your work, but the naming on this hasn't necessarily been decided, but essentially it'd be where all of your items would live. And we would have this as a separate section with its own sidebar. There's probably some additional pages that we need to consider as well. Like one I've been looking into is like, how do we handle the search page, which today doesn't have a sidebar. Things like a profile page, how would we handle that? So there's still some things to be figured out in terms of how we will handle some of these areas, but that is one of the essentially prerequisites in order to have this sidebar concept, is to make sure that there is always that sidebar present so a user can navigate to the areas they need to.
Would we be having dupes then, just so everyone's clear, because this is MVC, it's the same link that is if you clicked your issues on the top bar, is that correct?
Yeah, so
during the beta, opt-in beta, there would be some replication as we get from the beginning to the end.
Yeah, which I mean, that's still going to exist even when we get to like our North Star concept, for instance. So like if we go up here, so although we don't have like that issues and the MRs links in the top bar, we're still proposing that you would be able to locate that stuff from underneath like your user menu in the proposal we have for where those would potentially live. So you would click on user profile, you would see a list of things that are assigned to you, issues, MRs, etc. You click on that, it then takes you to the page that we have today for those. The only difference being you're now within essentially this your work or home section. So you have a different path that you can go there. Like we have a way to switch into like this home or your work section from this project switcher as well. But yeah, that duplication of ways to get to this will always exist. So here it'll be within like the top bar itself. You'll click on issues and it'll take you to issues. And in the future, it'll just be a little bit different.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah. I think we had talked before that maybe those icons would be persistent at the top on the left on the sidebar too, last week when we were talking, versus being under the user navigation. Because if I had to always click to see my number of to-dos, that would be a lot more work, and I wouldn't be able to just my issues and to-dos and MRs.
Yeah, I mean, so you're essentially talking about this step here, which I have as notifications relocated. I mean, this, as I kind of mentioned in the description here, this one is definitely not finalized. We need to do further research to determine like what the best path forward is for this. But really the goal is to reduce some of the noise that we have today in that top bar of always having these notifications essentially in your face and telling you have things to do, and have them a little bit more tucked away within like a user menu or potentially like some other section. And then the idea here that Austin proposed with this concept was that this little notifications icon that we have in the sidebar or in this top bar would essentially show you anything new that happened. So like if you had a new issue assigned to you or a new MR, you would essentially have a little notification here, and then you can find out what that new item was.
Okay.
But yeah, like I have explored, I even have a concept here of like, could we even fit all of those in as like a transitional path towards, getting to the sidebar concept where we initially, we keep these in the top bar, but we are still able to move to like the sidebar concept. But as you can see here, like it gets very much tight. Like we can't really have all of these items here without making the sidebar larger. And then in that effect makes your main content area smaller. So there's some trade-offs there. I'm sure we could figure out, a different way to handle this, but there's no like really simple way of like just keeping all of those items today and then still moving to this left sidebar concept.
I think, yeah, we got to investigate that, because the persistency of those would be like the one thing that I rely on to know where I'm at. And if it were just new ones, I couldn't manage. Like I'll often have over 100 to-dos or things I have to work on.
So at that point, what's the value of always seeing a notification?
It's not a notification to me. It's a list of the assigned items that I have to do now. I don't see them like it's a to-do. I have to get back to someone, but it's like, it's kind of the equivalent of unreads in Gmail or something, whether they're unread or not.
Yeah, it makes sense.
It's the only way I communicate, because I only use to-dos. I don't use any email to use GitLab.
Yeah, and that's fair. And yeah, like I mentioned, there's still definitely a lot of research before we can make that change, and it's why I had that as one of the further steps down the line, is like, we need to do that research before we could propose a change like that. But
okay, we'll add that to the list of further research. We've got favorites, sectioning, and persistency of those, and whether or not, I mean, if we get rid of them, we'll hear feedback. It will happen, so we can like adapt based on what people say who are in the beta.
I mean, that would be definitely one of the top items that I have, one, the least amount of confidence in the change right now, and also two, like we'll get the most feedback in, and I feel like will be one of the most controversial changes that we would make is the relocation of those items. So once we have a persistent sidebar, at that point we can move in to start utilizing the sidebar for these changes that we want to make. So one of the top ones being this context switcher. So this tested really well in our latest research. So for those who maybe haven't already seen that research, we essentially have the name of the project or the group as a clickable drop-down element that will then show you similar items that we have in like the main menu today. So like recent projects, recent groups. There isn't the ability to search here, and we are relying on global search for that at this point. But as well, that there's also a link that would go to like that your work or that your home section. So once we have essentially the sidebar on every page, we can move towards using this to be able to change context instead of how users use the main menu today. So at this point, we would essentially lose that main menu that we have in the top nav bar. That does have other links in it, such as like the dashboard pages. But those are items that we would plan to include on that, home or your work section as well, along with milestone snippets activity that's also in the main menu today. So that accounts for all of the items in the main menu, with the exception, like I said, of search, which we'll be moving towards pushing users to use global search to do searching of projects and groups in the future.
For that one, would we still have this? Was there a point where we would just have the main menu in the top bar and the switcher on our way to it before we've relocated everything?
It's possible, but at that point, it is very much a duplication of the same things that we already offer. And so that's why my first step was we had to have a sidebar to do the switcher, really. And so that's why this first step. And in doing that, we can add these items within that section that we're creating for your work or your home or whatever we're calling it.
Yeah.
So those will all
we'd
have
have to have already built your home. We have to add that as a step, because to be able to remove main nav and those items, we do have to have relocated them.
Yeah.
Are they all there?
Yeah.
If that's the group's milestone snippets activity. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So step one has us duplicated, and then we would remove it. Step 3.
Yeah. And
Okay.
There's I know you say duplicated, but really it's just adding a sidebar to those pages that currently don't have one. So none of those pages today have a sidebar, and now we're going to be adding that, and then they'll just be part of this section.
So we could even just, for part of step 1, main menu, potentially you could remove those redundant links at that point too.
Yeah, the only problem being at that point, we wouldn't have a quick way to get to this your work, home, whatever we're calling it, section. That is something that we're adding in with the context switcher as one of the top items. Granted, we could add that to the main menu. It's just, I don't see is it worth the time of adding another item to the main menu and doing more work on that versus just moving straight towards this. So that's why I proposed this. That's the direction. But like I said, there's definitely other paths and ways we could get there. It's just, this is my initial thoughts.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So at this point, we've relocated, we've essentially gotten rid of the main menu. Search still exists up here. We still keep our notifications at the top. The next thing I'm proposing moving, which may be a more significant change and may require a lot more effort than maybe I anticipate, would be relocating search. So in the designs for the North Star, we have search as essentially just a button that you can access from the left sidebar. And the idea is that would open a modal where you would essentially have the same experience that you have today in search, just within a modal. So that would be the update here, is we would transition search from its location in the top bar to being a button in the sidebar that then presents our current search experience in a modal. This is kind of one of the biggest hurdles in terms of us getting to the point where we can relocate everything to this left sidebar, just because of how much room search takes up today, especially in this expanded state. I don't know if everyone's aware, but when you focus on the global search, it does expand in today's state to show things like your current context, like shown here. So we really can't move to this left sidebar concept until we complete this task.
And that's the one, it would work the same way with the keyboard shortcut too, right? As it
Yes.
currently does. It'll just have that more minimal look.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. And then
Yeah.
modal, the centered modal, do we have that concept in pajamas yet? The way we want it to work?
So, I mean, we have modals, but this is a bit different because it's essentially going to be a search component that kind of acts as a modal. So I think there'll be some differences there. We won't be able to use like something out of the box. I will say that there is current work that's been going on in terms of creating a command palette that looks very much similar to this. And like I mentioned in the description over here, like one of our goals with search is to make it into more of a command palette type experience, where you can both navigate as well as search from the same location. And I've kind of already had discussions with Marcel and those that are working on the command palette to kind of discuss some of these items, and I think everyone's kind of in alignment in that regard. But my point is, like, there's already been some work to create an experience like this using a modal, and there's actually like an MR currently open around this. Nice. It's like a proof of concept. But yeah, like I was saying initially, like it's not something that's like out of the box, anything we can do. It's a little bit more custom to get this to work.
Yes. Okay. I like it.
All right. And then this brings us to the thing that we were talking about before of the notifications being relocated. So this one definitely need to do more research on, need to potentially put together some other options in terms of design to be able to test some different ways that we could do this with users. But we really can't, like I mentioned, we can't move all these items that we have today in the top nav bar within this limited space in the left sidebar without reducing some of this, whether we have like some of these just within a drop down, or we just figure out a different way to lay these out. It just can't currently get us to this point without changing some of this behavior. So in the example prototype that we used for the previous testing, this is essentially what we had, where we removed those items and they were relocated underneath the user menu. I can go ahead and pull that up too, just to show what that looks like. Granted, like I said, this isn't like finalized, it's just one idea. Within the user menu, having a section for to-dos, for assigned and created issues, as well as merge requests that are reviewed, requested, and assigned. And so like this is essentially the proposal for where you could see those notifications and still quickly get to those areas, but you're not constantly being reminded that you have 8 things on your to-do, 3 issues that you have assigned to you, and however many merge requests. There's obviously pluses and minuses to that. Some people do rely on that today. Others, maybe it is a lot of noise and they don't like to see all that notification all the time.
Did we get that feedback that it's noise? The assigned items are noise?
Did we get that feedback? Is that what you're asking?
Like during the testing, because I've never heard that.
I mean, we weren't necessarily testing anything around that with this navigation testing.
Okay.
So I wouldn't be able to say one way or the other that the current way we present those is problematic to users.
I think they're our most clicked item, like they're our most valuable, other than the avatar, the home link. I believe that's our most used real estate and most clicked item in all of GitLab.
Yeah. So
we should make sure that they're still accessible and that people can see them. I know you could click to find them, but
yeah,
I just want to make sure that we're careful with that.
I guess like one of the things that I would want to understand is it simply the links to those areas that are most important, or is it like the notifications themselves that's important? Like, or is it both?
The numbers, and for me, it's just like in Slack, like if seeing if I have to respond to somebody or something is important. So those are the to-dos, kind of like an inbox. And then my open MRs, I hit that every day, my open issues. And if one has gone up or down, it's interesting to me because like I'm burning down usually, like I've got like tons to go through. So watching the number go down or go up means there's things I haven't taken care of. If I had to click every time to see that, I wouldn't be aware that like maybe I burned out all my to-dos and 3 more came in. There'd be no way for me to know that the team had reached out to me again.
Yeah,
without clicking.
and I mean, I think that's why Austin was proposing that we have this notification area here which would inform you of anything that new happened. So like once you went and you like looked at your assigned issues, essentially those notifications would go away. But until you've essentially viewed or read everything that is new to you, you're going to have some sort of a notification saying that there are items that need your attention.
Which are to-dos, but yes, essentially it's the same thing.
Yeah.
Right?
Essentially, yeah.
It's like the list you have to burn down. Like right now I have over 100 things I have to do. 160 actually after my vacation. And it like if that I have to hit that list and watch it go down, and then like once it's down, then it's easier to see when ones come in. But
yeah,
I would want to just see more research on that. And I don't know, maybe there's a place where they could fit on the sidebar too, like if there was another line or more real estate opened up or something.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying is like there's definitely other ways we can handle this, whether it's changing the layout. Just but my point is like there needs to be some sort of with this step, go back to it. There needs to be some sort of layout adjustment in order to be able to move to a fully left sidebar concept before we can make this change. Like we can't, like I said, just keep what we have today as it is and go to this left sidebar. So like whatever it may be, whether it's changing the layout, putting some stuff under a menu, whatever that may be, like that's essentially the step here that we need to make. But there needs to be research done before we can make that decision of like what that is. But at that point, that's when we can essentially rely on just one sidebar versus having a sidebar along with a top bar as we have today.
Yeah.
So like this is one of the biggest transitions here. Is that step.
Yeah, that one's like, yeah, that's where it like fully goes away. And then before that we still had the top bar.
Yep.
Okay. I guess we can look at it as well, but are there other companies that do fully, like other apps that get fully rid of the top bar and only use side and don't ever have it?
I mean, the one that just I think of top of mind is Linear. That's a full sidebar. I know there's another one by JetBrains who also utilizes kind of like a double sidebar, like Austin had played with some initial concepts. But yeah, and honestly, that was probably one of the biggest praises of the full left sidebar concept was that they liked the fact that the entire right side was focused on their content. So like they had 2 distinct areas, like one where they do their navigation and one is focused on the content that they're working on. So I don't
That makes sense.
necessarily see a world where we keep this top bar just because like that was one of the major things we were testing and it tested very much better with the removal of the top bar. We just had to figure out how to handle some of these things that currently take up a lot of real estate in that top bar.
Yeah, and like right now, so we've got the left, so this is good on the MVC, the left bar is still gray, or sorry, I don't know what we call that color, but the really light gray.
Yeah.
Technically, it will match the right-hand sidebars if you're on plan or MRs when you open up the side pane.
Yeah, so
Well, that will all work the
technically,
same, but how will that, will it interact, like being of like a line lower on the right? Or will the right sidebar go all the way to the top of the browser? Will it just go up to that horizontal line?
no, I think I would need to probably like experiment with this in some designs, but my thought is that that would probably still go all the way to the top, like of the content. So, see if we have.
It looks like it's a part of Lime, so I kind of like, my gut would say it would hit that, not go all the way to the top, but the way we have it currently, it is. Because I like the prominence of like the breadcrumbs kind of being like all the way across, like it kind of like tells you you're in that. But
Yeah, I mean, I can
I
understand
don't
what you're
really
saying.
care.
As it stands today, like this doesn't. So, like, say we just removed this top bar if you didn't see it, like could go into the inspector and just displayed it none. Like these are all on the same level. Like even though this is within GitLab, it's all still on the same level. So
They look like
this,
they're the same prominence almost. Left and right bars to me look the same if I was just glancing.
yeah, which potentially is one of the problems today, is that like you don't feel like this is maybe specific to like the location you're in, but that's also potentially why we're moving and changing that with things such as like, of course, I don't have any MRs currently for review, but you know how we have this looking more as part of the page here. So maybe that's one of the reasons why we're going in that direction. So I don't want to be too concerned with this sidebar at this moment, because I don't know if we're going to be ending up moving towards this anyways, and so whether or not that's a problem in the future.
Yeah,
It'll be something we have to
I think
consider
it's
once we get there, but
yeah, if we end up following the design of MRs, that one did look different, more different than the left nav, which is good.
yeah.
And when we get to colors eventually, right? You haven't got to talking theming yet, but
Yeah,
when there's a dark purple or a black left sidebar, then it's not going to matter as much. They won't compete.
yeah. I mean, yeah, technically, like these are not the exact, like this has a white background on the right side. We have like our gray or whatever here. And so like this is essentially using exactly what we have today for the left sidebar. But yeah, in the future, once we get to theming, like things will change where like this will be a different color, but I don't know if that's enough distinction versus like eventually moving towards something like this for issues too. And I think that probably is the path that we're going to be going towards. But yeah, it's something we'll have to consider, is how that's going to be laid out in the future. Any other questions on this step? I know this is like kind of a big one, but
yeah, that's good. Let's do more research on that one too.
Yeah,
we've got time at least till we get to moving those over.
Yeah,
got a few months.
This one is more of a smaller change, and I think this one could be done like in tandem of some other things, but essentially, so today we have our collapse behavior, the toggle at the very bottom as like a footer on our sidebar. This change just updates that to free up that area for things that we found better use with some of our current testing, which was the settings link, which I'll go to in the next step. But since we want to use this area for something else in the future, and so reducing the prominence of that collapse button, because it does take up quite a bit of room today, and probably making it so it only shows on hover is the direction that we're looking at going. So it'd be updating how that interaction works today for toggling the
You'd have to hover which one to make that open?
So
to make
hovering
it
over
visible?
any part of the sidebar here would essentially show your button to be able to collapse the sidebar.
Okay.
Is the thought. Which leads us to the area that I was talking about, that it opens up. With this last round of testing, we looked at having settings as essentially an item that is now in the footer of each of these menus for projects and groups. One, it's something that probably isn't accessed quite as often as some of these other links within our main navigation on the left-hand side, as well as it puts it in a consistent location for both projects and groups. And seeing that we have quite a bit of different menu options within settings, it then allows us to essentially kind of show those in like a sidebar takeover when you select it.
That's cool.
And then you can view all your settings and navigate from there. But that is essentially that change. So as you see, like there are
Something
some
like that could technically layer in, like, could be the second thing we do too, right? Like move settings down and make it open, close in a different way. So that one may not be gated by anything else.
Exactly, and that's what I was about to say. Is like this is like another one of those things where like this could be done, way earlier in the process, but it does have a dependency of like changing how we do the collapse behavior today. So like some of these are ordered based off of dependency, but there's definitely room to move like these around in terms of when we decide to do them. Next item on here, navigation groupings. So this is another somewhat larger change and potentially could be somewhat controversial just because it does by default hide some of your items within a grouping. This did test well just because users preferred a less overwhelming menu to begin, and then these logical groupings did seem to make sense as to where these items would live. We definitely need to do further research to make sure that we do place all the items within groupings that do make sense and that these names are what we want to move forward with. But that is essentially what this step is consolidating our current items within these groupings. Some items we do feel are used enough where we'd want them always exposed. Examples could be like project overview, like your issues, your merge requests, potentially pipelines. These are the initial ones that we tested out, but it doesn't mean that those are necessarily the final ones that we would want always exposed. And this would be the same for all projects, and it would be the same for all groups. It wouldn't be something that you would essentially customize.
Okay. That was my next question.
I mean, we could consider that
That's
when
down
we're
the
doing
road
some of
if
this.
we consider.
Yeah.
It makes it hard to write docs and things when everything's always changing, or like
Exactly.
everyone sets theirs up different.
Yeah. And this just shows an example of like expanding one of those sections, what that would look like.
Would we still have the rollouts? Or are
Rollouts.
we only going to expand vertically?
Yeah, so we currently have, you're talking about essentially these menus, flyout menus. So yeah, we wouldn't keep those with this new approach. We would have these, you essentially would need to select one of these sections to expand it, and then you would have to select the item that you want to go to. We wouldn't have a flyout menu. So with that change, a hope would be to somewhat quickly behind that move into this concept around favorites. So to help some users deal with this change of having these items located within these sections, but still wanting to maintain things that they care about the most as like a very, accessible item, we're looking at the possibility of being able to favorite items within the menu. So when you expand something like develop, you can see if hovering over these items, we now show like a star next to them to where you could select that. And then in the future, that would show up underneath your favorite section. So then you could easily access that without having to open that menu in the future. That keeps things still somewhat, consolidated and less overwhelming for the majority of users, but then still gives you the ability to kind of build out a menu that suits you best and the workflow that you need to go through.
I like that. And then I'd want to favorite all the way to my homepage too for some of them. But
favorite all the way to
it's cool setting it up. Like I might want to go to the issues of the pajamas project. So like rather than navigate to it and then click the favorite
Oh,
there.
I
There
see what
may
you're
be
saying.
one I want to promote all the way to a favorite for me on my user page
Like on your home
so that
dashboard
I
that
could
we're
just
talking
hit it
about.
in one. Yeah, so I could just hit it in one click versus having to go around. And then I could have like the 5 projects I care about, the 5 issues right there from my homepage. Bam, bam, bam.
Yep.
Because
Yep.
I don't need to go anywhere else, but usually issues or boards myself.
Sense.
That's cool though. Would those also work the same way? Like if you had pipelines running or assigned items in the favorites, they'd get their like blue indicator with the count if it applied.
You were talking about pipeline. We don't currently show any sort of indicator with pipelines today,
It's
right?
really just, yeah, it's issues and merge requests, I guess. I
Yeah.
wasn't sure if there's any other ones that get assigned where there might be a count. But these are total counts on
Yeah.
total issues, total MRs.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a bit different. They aren't really personal to the user at this point.
It's to the project.
Yep.
Never mind.
So that does lead us to the next item, which is not another very large thing, which is the home dashboard. So I know there's already been some research done on the home dashboard. We put together kind of just a quick mock-up of some things that we could see value in having, but these weren't necessarily based off of the previous research. They were just a quick way for us to put together a home page and test like having some different items here and just a location for users to go back to. Definitely more research needs to be done on this, as well as like looking into any past research, but this will definitely probably be a larger effort. I mean, we can definitely start small with, having it very minimal, like just maybe recent work items or something. But we also have to realize that we do offer the ability to change your current home dashboard today to different things. And we don't necessarily want to take that over with an experience that is very minimal, such as we just did recent work items. If that's not as valuable to something else that users have set up today, we want them to be able to continue using that until we have this maybe more built out. So there's definitely going to be an iterative approach to how we do this, but we also have to take into account what users are able to do today in terms of selecting different home dashboard states or versions.
So if you haven't selected a specific place, this is where you'll go when you hit the avatar. If you have, we'll leave that intact. And that's like, would it be a choice to put it to default behavior or something?
Yeah, so I think that's one way you could handle it is like if you haven't changed it, then we just update it with maybe this is what we see as most valuable or something. Because we still are making it very easy to get to the projects list from here anyways. But for some of those other things that users have chosen to have as their home dashboard, maybe we would leave that for them until we had this more built out or further validation
That's
and
cool.
effort.
Yeah, and I think we can start minimal because we're beta and everything, so that's good. And we're keeping their current use case intact, so I think that's good.
Yeah. And then that leads us to, I think this is the last step I have. Yeah. So this is the last step I have. And essentially like this to me, although like I enjoy themes, I feel like it's adding the least amount of value towards our path to the North Star. And it's like, that's why it is last. It's just essentially modifying some of our current theming to make that experience better, as well as reduce some of the amount of themes that we currently have today. So like, we have, I think it was like 10 different themes, some of which I'm sure are very minimally utilized. Things like the red theme, I don't know if anyone really would use that. So the idea is that we would reduce the amount of themes, and then we would try and focus probably on like a dark version, a light version, maybe like a brand version, and something like taking into account accessibility, like having maybe some accessible oriented themes as well, just based off of those needs. So this is kind of be like our last step towards getting to what we have here as like our North Star. And granted, this isn't
And the
like a
purple
completely
one, I got kind of attached to purple. Is that not there? The dark purple that was in the
like this one,
final
or
comp.
oh, you're talking
I'm not
about.
seeing it.
Hold on 1 second.
And I'm not like 100 attached. I just didn't see the purple. But I think it was lighter. Maybe it was on the MVC scratch pad we did.
Are you talking about this one or the one that was like fully purple on the left-hand side?
I think it was fully purple on the left. Was the one we were putting comments on in the scratch pad.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. Give me just a sec.
It's okay.
Oh, of course, I chose the wrong one.
We can come back to it. It's okay. But
I got it. It's right here.
the idea of, oh, yeah, that's the one. I really like that one. I don't know why, but.
So yeah, I mean, this had mixed kind of feedback in the session. Some people really liked it. Some people really didn't like it. What we were looking at doing with that feedback was being a bit more subtle with the use of the theme color, which is why, like you see here, actually these are the light and dark versions. I had a different version, which is essentially like this one, where like say this is the purple theme, like we would use purple as like an accent color and then not as much as like a full background color.
That's interesting.
We can still consider things like this where it's a bit more in your face, but we also don't want to be distracting with the use of color with the themes.
Yeah.
It's like that's why we were exploring that were options that were a little bit more subtle in the color usage.
Yeah.
Like I said, these are really just kind of dark and light versions. This was more like a brand. Like this is essentially similar branding that we use on our marketing site. If you view that, like the sidebar that we have there. So that's one option, or doing something, like I said, more like this, where we just use that as more like an accent color.
Yeah.
But what I was going to mention with
The
this
contrast
is like,
of that is really nice because it makes the content really pop. Like on the right, like to me, it's like I'm settling into work looking at that white section, and then the left kind of fades away more into the background because it's darker.
yeah, and
Like
that's the feedback that we got from those that liked more of like a darker theme,
Mhm.
of like they liked, being able to focus here on the right hand side, and this kind of, although it was like kind of bold, it kind of went to the background. So some users don't prefer more of a lighter approach. So like that's why, like just like we have today, we got to account for both light and dark, and then maybe a bit more color for those that prefer to have low color.
That purple option would be fun, the bright one.
Yeah.
Get more in the line of like black or something.
Yeah.
Now
But I guess
I like moving this to the end because it's like it's not the value add, but it's more the pretty parts of it. However, if we gate it on theming, which we have on our roadmap as one of the things we have to tackle, that's a large project. That would be a year. If we have to gate on themes working in GitLab, that would put us behind maybe even a year of work. But we can verify that with engineering. So that would be my only concern is we may just have to pick one for now to get it live, not call it theming yet, and then come back around with a better theming framework.
Yeah.
But this would be a great question for the engineers.
Yeah. That's why, like, ideally, I think it'd be good to start with maybe two versions, just like a light and dark. Like, I don't think the effort for that would be too much, but I'm sure, engineers will have better perspective on that. Just because, like, we do have kind of two different perspectives when it comes to viewing this, and like we very much saw that in the testing. Some people really liked a dark sidebar. Some people really liked a more clean, like light version for a sidebar. And so if we were able to at least offer those two, I think we would at least handle majority of cases. The color options is where it gets to be like a very much more opinionated and like just kind of like fun for people. but having a light and dark version, I think, is a bit more important.
That black one doesn't really look GitLab-y to me, but
This one,
yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's more of like your dark theme like we have today. Like it's essentially like this.
And I guess we did go to black now, right? But
What do you
yeah,
mean, like?
the top bar of GitLab, is it now? I thought it was purple. Oh no, it's for me, it's that dark purple, but
Yeah, that indigo. I think that's the default theme.
the indigo. Yeah, but I agree though. I think if we have an opt-in to a beta with a switch, which we have to talk about as well, and the user can go between normal and North Star during the 6 months that we're building, I think it would be very cool for it to be real clear that you're on North Star. So like if your nav is dark, you know you're on it. You could switch back to normal if you want to go back to the light world where we have everything light for everybody. So there could be a less during the time we're building. Maybe we get one up that's dark. People can see the contrast. And then as we refine at the end, we can give them the switcher between light and dark or something like that. And then to themes.
Yep, absolutely. And then
Yeah, this is cool.
Here was the other one. Like I said, there's been a lot of like just kind of playing with some of the theming options, but like this is maybe a little bit more color than you were seeing here in like that dark version.
It feels very masculine, like the black. I don't know, even with just having one little purple thing, like it feels to me like it's just devoid of color, or like a, I don't know. I don't want to gender anything, but like to me, I'm just like, feels like a men's product or something. Like when it's all black.
Yeah, and it's kind of difficult with themes. It's kind of a very opinionated space, but like I got a lot of feedback, like for instance with this one, like, oh, like the active state's too bold, and so like making it more subtle. Before I had like this top portion as purple as well, and like people thought there was too much color. So like what I guess I'm trying to say is like none of this is all finalized. It's definitely still in the works, but it's also not the most important stuff right now that we need to focus on. And so like I'm not trying to put a ton of time towards it, but it's definitely things need to be figured out before we get to this stage, regardless.
Never even thought about those colors before. But I think I love our indigo, that deep purple, because it's like it's a warm and a cool, like red and blue mix, right? So it's kind of like in between of everything, and it's not like vibrant purple, but it's like
the reason that I seem to go more towards like purple is like we don't really use indigo in our branding, like especially as of late, like we're very much more on like this purple theme. So that's why like I try and tie us back to our branding a bit more with some of these new concepts. That said, like, none of it's finalized, still working through it, but I do like bringing in like more of our like branding that we use externally into our product. I think it ties it a little bit better, but
I like that too.
Yeah, just some initial thoughts.
Nice. I'm in total agreement though on light and dark, and then we just figure out how we get them in the right order for during the opt-in.
Yep.
We've only got a few minutes left before 11. Was there anything else to talk through on this final?
No. So yeah, like this is just like the North Star concept I was showing as like kind of where we're trying to go, but that essentially is all of it. Like I said, all this is kind of open to interpretation, how we want to move forward. It's just my kind of first pass at laying out a path that works to add value along the way while getting us to a state where we can support, a full left sidebar concept.
Yeah, this is good. And I think for Thursday, so I'll share this video with the team. They can watch this and kind of catch up on just seeing each one. And then when we go through them in the sync call, everyone should be on the same page. We can kind of, did you call them, do they have numbers? 1, 2, 3?
Yeah, I numbered them.
Yeah, steps. Okay. So conversations we can have on each one in the agenda. I can just get them in for each different step. And then we'll see if they have feedback in terms of order, splitting into even smaller steps in between. But this is really cool to see it all come together. I like seeing all the left nav content just in that new sidebar too, so that it's just clear we're just kind of moving it over as is.
Yep. Exactly. That's why I
This
thought
is
this might be
awesome.
helpful, is like showing some of this like iterative approach of like, you know, it's hard to see like our current state and then just see new and not like be able to quickly see all the differences. And so by like showing how we can slowly like add things in while keeping some of our current state, I think is helpful. It helps to kind of break things down into like how we can kind of go on this path while not having to do everything at once and like flipping a switch. But yeah.
Agreed. So do you mind uploading those onto the design management as well before Thursday, just so we have them there as a reference?
Yep, I can do that.
And then we can break them down from there as needed. But with this list, as long as engineering can validate it and help us, I think we've got an amazing plan. Like we've got almost 10, step 10 to getting towards it. I think when we break it down, it might be more like there might be like 20 steps, like double this when we break them even smaller, but this is like a really awesome first pass at it. And thank you so much for doing all this legwork, because it makes it so simple to discuss it.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, I just figured like I would have a hard time discussing some of this with the development team without having some like visuals to show. And I figured this will just kind of help us in our meeting tomorrow.
Yeah, this will be awesome. Thanks.
Yeah, no problem.
I'm just going to stop recording.